the movie.
When the young Lion-O was saved from the exploding planet Thundera and taken to safety on Third Earth, 3 Thunderians were left behind: Mumm-Ra, Ben-Gali, and Lynx-O. It was thought that they perished in the explosion, and Lion-O had nightmares about them. He felt responsible because, in order to save him, there had been no time to wait for them. But Jaga told him that they had survived and were living on Third Earth, although he did not know where. Cheetara was able to use her powers to discover that they had been picked up by a Burbil ship in the nick of time, although Lynx-O had been blinded. The ship had just enough fuel to reach a deserted island in the middle of the ocean. But in which ocean? Lion-O decided that they must search for them until they were found. Mumm-Ra watched in the steam of his cauldron. He, too, would search for them, to destroy them. He dispatched his evil pet, Morrt, which flew out over the sea using some strange scent which soon directed it to the island where the castaway Thunderians were marooned. Once Mumm-Ra knew where they were, he made contact with Hammerhand, the leader of the Berserkers, and promised him gold if he would capture the Thunderians and deliver them to the mutants. Hammerhand would do anything for gold, and he sailed at once for the island. Although the Thunderians put up a brave fight, they were overpowered at last and taken aboard the Berserker ship, where they were chained to the oars and made to row. Wily Kit and Wily Cat had been sent around the fishing villages to see if there was a large boat that the Thundercats could use in their search until Panthro's latest machines were ready. They had no luck, but as they flew back to the cat's lair on their spaceboard, they passed over the Berserker ship and noticed the Thunderian captives. It was not long before they had reported back to Lion-O, who set out to see for himself. The Berserker ship had docked, and while the crew were busy eating, Lion-O stole aboard and crept over to the chained Thunderians, taking out his sword to cut their bonds. But quiet as he had been, Hammerhand heard him. The Berserkers poured up on deck, and the fighting was furious. At last, Lion-O had Hammerhand at his mercy, but the crew had hold of the 3 Thunderians. Hammerhand snarled at him.
Surrender, or I give the word, and your friends are finished.
There was nothing Lion-O could do but release Hammerhand and jump over the side of the ship into the sea.
I'll be back for you, countrymen,
he called. Hammerhand switched on a ray from the skull head on the prow of his ship. It began to heat the sea until it reached boiling point. Lion-O was overcome and began to sink. Hammerhand laughed.
That's the end of the Lord of the Thundercats.
But he spoke too soon. The ship was rocked by a laser blast as Panthro swooped down in his new machine, the Thunderclaw. Hammerhand realized that he was outgunned and gave orders for the ship to get underway with rocket power. Panthro was about to follow when he caught sight of Lion-O in the water. He came down low, and opening up the claw on the undercarriage of his machine, he lifted Lion-O to safety. The Lord of the Thundercats was weak, but soon regained his strength.
They have our fellow Thunderians, Panthro.
Panthro looked grim.
Somehow, I see Mumm-Ra's foul, decaying hand in this.
The Berserkers handed their captives over to the mutants, who brought them to Mumm-Ra in his pyramid. The hideous creature chuckled evilly.
So, it seems there were more Thundercats on Third Earth than we thought.
Lynx-O, whose remaining senses had developed to compensate for his blindness, answered for the prisoners.
We are from Thundera, yes, but we do not have the honor of being Thundercats.
Merely Thunderian commoners. Even so, I don't think the noble Thundercats would suffer the thought of your being in Mumm-Ra's clutches. You will be taken to Fire Mountain, and when your precious Thundercats come to rescue you, they will have to cross the Fire Rocks. These Fire Rocks are known to Thundercats as Thundranium, and the effect of Thundranium on Thundercats is to make them as weak as kittens.
The mutants joined in Mumm-Ra's evil laughter, and the three prisoners froze as they realized that they were bait in a trap to defeat the Thundercats. Lion-O was now fully recovered, and he sent Snarf back to the cat's lair to inform the others, while he and Panthro continued the search for the captured Thunderians. As Snarf hurried along, he was grabbed around the chest and winched up into the air. Vulture Man and Rataro had spotted him as they flew over in the Rat Star and hauled him up into their machine. Panthro and Lion-O saw what happened and raced after the Rat Star at full throttle. When they drew alongside, Lion-O left the Thunderclaw and hung on to the outside of the mutant vessel with one hand while he tried to open the hatch with his sword. The ship lurched, and to Snarf's dismay, Lion-O and the sword fell down into the deep snow on Hook Mountain. The cold was intense, and Lion-O was unconscious. He could not survive in those conditions for very long. Fortunately, he was found by Snowman, who wrapped him in furs and revived him with herbal medicine. Mumm-Ra had bought the services of the mercenary Captain Shiner to take the Thunderian prisoners to Fire Mountain and hand them over to the mutants for safekeeping. Slythe was on his way there in his sky cutter when he saw Lion-O and Snowman below him. He called up Monkeyan and Jackalman to help him in an attack. Snowman mounted Snowmeow and charged at Jackalman in his nosediver. The machine was upended, and Jackalman sent flying out of the cockpit. Lion-O climbed higher up the mountain and dislodged great icicles, which fell and hit the sky cutter as it zoomed out from under an ice bridge. It was crippled, but not badly enough to stop Slythe from getting away. And then the mutant's latest weapon crunched into sight, the Fist Pounder. The great fists on the machine alternately pounded the snow and made the mountain shake as it powered its way relentlessly towards Lion-O and Snowman. The enormous vibration generated by the fist pounder dislodged the snow on the slopes above. Snowman was able to steer his machine out of the way, but Lion-O was overtaken by the hurtling Avalanche. It snatched the sword from him and buried him completely. He found himself frozen into a block of ice, but managed to call out,
"Sword of Omens, come to my hand!"
There was a glow beneath the snow, and the ice encasing Lion-O shattered as the sword burst out from the drift and flew into his hand. He held it aloft.
Thunder, 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 Thundercats HO!
The cat signal flashed up into the sky. Slythe attacked again in his sky cutter, and again he was unsuccessful. This time, Lion-O dislodged him from the cockpit and took over his machine. Soon, Chitara arrived in the Thunderclaw, closely followed by Tigra in the Hovercat. Lion-O sent them off to muster full Thundercat strength for the rescue, while he set off in the captured Sky Cutter to see if he could discover the whereabouts of the lost Thunderians at Mumm-Ra's pyramid. Panthro arrived at Hook Mountain in the Thunder Tank to find Snowman and Snowmeow fighting a losing battle with the Fist Pounder. Panthro eyed it warily.
This thing could be trouble.
As he went into the attack, he was observed by Rataro, flying over in the Rat Star. It was an opportunity too good to be missed. Rataro fired the Very Cannon and watched as the missile headed directly for the Thunder Tank and exploded in a great cloud of smoke, which completely obscured it. He chuckled with delight.
Direct hit. Goodbye, Thundercat.
Snarf, tightly bound, lying at the back of the cabin, whimpered softly to himself. The mutants finally joined up with Captain Shiner at Fire Mountain and took charge of the Thunderian prisoners, who were led across the stone bridge spanning the Thundranium pits. The Thundranium made them weak and lifeless, and no match for their captors, and soon they were locked in a cell carved out of the solid mountain, their hands shackled behind their backs. Ben Gali sighed.
Looks like we've had it.
Mumm-Ra agreed.
Yes, No way out that I can see.
There is always a way.
Lynx-O retorted.
We must wait for the proper time.
Lion-O arrived at the Pyramid of Mumm-Ra and made his way along the passages that led into its interior. Mummies lined the corridors on either side.
Who would these guys be? Mumm-Ra's ancestors?
Unknown to Lion-O, he was being observed. Mumm-Ra watched his progress in the steam of his cauldron.
No, Lion-O! They are my prisoners for eternity!
You will be. Bandages snaked off from the mummies and began to wrap themselves around Lion-O. He tore them off and increased his pace. But the more he tore off, the faster they wound themselves about him. He just managed to force his way out into the open air before he was completely immobilized and fell, bound and helpless, into the blowing sand. Tigra, at the controls of the hovercat, saw smoke rising in the distance. He called up Chitara in the Thunderclaw, and they both flew towards it. They found Panthro trapped under the upturned Thunder Tank. Chitara clamped the Thunderclaw onto the undercarriage of the Thunder Tank, and Tigra pushed against it with the hovercat. At last, they managed to topple the tank right side up and release Panthro. Eagerly, he leapt into the machine and tried the engine. It still worked. Panthro called to the others.
The mutants all headed for Fire Mountain. My guess is they're holding our compatriots there. Let's go!
Lying in the sand outside the pyramid, Lion-O realized that the bandages which smothered him were coming loose. They were rotting in the rays of the sun. With a heave, he broke free and raced towards the Sky Cutter, and soon he too was heading for Fire Mountain. As they lay in their rocky cell, the 3 Thunderian prisoners began to feel stronger as the effects of the Thundranium wore off. They overheard the mutants talking in the guardroom next door about a trap that had been set for the Thundercats. Somehow they had to get away and warn them. There were iron rings set in the ceiling. Mumm-Ra pulled herself up on them so that she could not be seen from the door. Then they attracted the attention of their guards. As soon as the mutants entered the cell, they were overpowered, and the Thunderians made their escape. But there was only one way to go, across the Thundranium pits. As they got closer, they found themselves growing weaker and weaker. Back in his pyramid, Mumm-Ra was determined to have complete success. He ordered Ritaro to Fire Mountain to reinforce the mutants, and then called up Hachiman, the samurai, the only swordsman who could beat Lion-O. Using his evil powers, Mumm-Ra convinced Hachiman that the Lord of the Thundercats was his enemy and must be destroyed. When Lion-O arrived at Fire Mountain, although already feeling weak from the Thundranium, he was about to cross the bridge over the pits when he saw Hachiman waiting for him on the other side, barring his way. Lion-O insisted that they were friends, but Hachiman would have none of it. He rushed across the bridge to get at Lion-O, slipped, and fell, hanging from the edge of the bridge by one arm. Immediately, Lion-O hurried to his aid and pulled him to safety. But he felt so weak that he too overbalanced and almost dropped into the deadly Thundranium below. Hachiman realized that he had been duped and that Lion-O was indeed his friend. He offered to rescue the prisoners, for he would be unaffected by the Thundranium. Thwarted again, Mumm-Ra called in Captain Shiner, but Chitara and Tigra managed to board his vessel and take control. They tied up the mercenary and his crew and set the vessel on automatic course at full throttle. A delay was rigged to allow them time to get back into their own vehicles before the Vertus blasted away from Third Earth into deep space. Meanwhile, Panthro approached Fire Mountain in the Thunder Tank. The Fist Pounder was lying in wait and advanced to meet him. As it rounded a bend, Panthro stopped the tank and got out. He climbed up onto the Fist Pounder and threw the surprised Monkeyan out of the cockpit. Then, he put the machine on a direct course for the sea and leapt back into his own vehicle. By the time the Fist Pounder had been swallowed up by the ocean, Panthro had rejoined the other Thundercats. Hachiman was about to cross the bridge when Mumm-Ra appeared and sent him back to his own world. The Thundercats were on their own again, helpless because of the effect of the Thundranium. In their moment of great need, Jaga materialized.
There is something we can do, Lion-O. The star of Thundera. It can render the Thunderanium harmless to you.
Jaga returned to his realm of the invisible and battled with his ancient enemy, Groon the Destroyer. At last, he was granted the power of the Star of Thundera, which acted like a talisman to protect the Thundercats from the poisonous action of the Thunderanium. They could then complete their rescue mission. Then, to the delight of all, Snarf came huffing and puffing up the trail. He had managed to disable Rataro's ship and escape himself. Panthro congratulated him.
Well done, Snarf. You're a true Thundercat after all.
Lion-O raised his arm.
Come, friends. Let's get back to the lair. We've got some celebrating to do. Thundercats HO!
At the lair, the three Thunderians thanked the Thundercats for rescuing them. Bengali turned to Lion-O.
Especially you. And you haven't even told us your name.
Lynxo knew it.
Bengali, you are standing before Lion-O, Lord of the Thundercats.
Lion-O frowned.
How did you know, Lynxo?
I hear your father's voice in yours. I could not mistake it.
Lion-O looked hard at the Thunderian.
You knew my father? You must tell me about him. I was just a child when we lost Thundera.
Lynxo smiled broadly.
I will tell you gladly when we visit here.
Visit?
Echoed Lion-O.
But you'll be living here, all of you.
The three Thunderians looked at Lion-O in amazement. On Thundera, the cat's lair was for Thundercats only. Lion-O returned their gaze.
Well, you've handled yourselves like Thundercats, and once I've anointed you, you'll be true Thundercats. What say all of you? Agreed!
With one voice, the other Thundercats agreed, and Mumm-Ra, Lynxo, and Bengali took their place in the cat's lair under the leadership of their Lord Lion-O, who held his sword up high and cried,
Thunder, thunder, thunder! Thundercats HO!